on the news. Governor Kathy Hochul makes history as the first woman to deliver New York's State of the State address.
What I am proposing is a whole new era for New York.
We'll break down the issues most important to Catholics.
As Omicron surges, keeping students safe is more important than ever. I'm Jessica Easthope with why one Catholic school says they're most protected right here.
Plus, we sit down with Bishop Brennan to talk about a number of topics, including how one can keep the faith in the time of COVID. And Bishop Brennan celebrated the Haitian Ministry's Independence Day Mass. I'm Christine Persichetti. Currents News starts right now. The battle against the Omicron surge is being waged here and across the country in homes, hospitals, and even classrooms. But the surge is not keeping Catholic school students at home. In the Diocese of Brooklyn, students are coming back for the new year in person and taking precautions, new and old, to stop the rampant spread of the variant. Currents News' Jessica Easthope reports from Flushing that educators say kids are safest at school.
Happy New Year! Welcome back!
These first graders are back in the classroom for the first time in 2022. And their first 2 days of school at St. Mel's started remote because 7 teachers were out with COVID. But now they're back.
Are you guys excited to be back in school?
Yeah! It was a tough decision to make, but in light of the staffing situation that we had and the current rise in Omicron, I believe it was the right one.
Are those your sight words?
Principal Amy Barron shows excitement differently. For her, it's more like relief that her students are back in the place where they're safest.
We haven't seen any outbreaks within the school, just isolated incidents that unfortunately they're happening everywhere. But the important thing is that we keep our kids safe.
Masks are still up and hands are still being sanitized. Just some of the many precautions that allowed 70% of schools in the Diocese of Brooklyn to open in person on Monday. Once there were enough teachers, Barron brought students back knowing they're protected and getting the most they can out of school right here in their classroom.
Nothing takes the place of a live teacher. The interaction, the support that they get from their teacher.
The little things like telling them they're doing a great job, being able to give them that one-on-one support, it's way better here in the classroom than it is on Zoom.
And it's the little things for the students too. Sharpening a pencil, scooters in gym, and what Ms. Murphy's first graders call a brain break. Are all things that can't happen over Zoom. Teachers say the COVID precautions are a small sacrifice for a big payoff.
What they have to do to go to school, and they fully understand that, and it works out for all of us.
St. Mel's welcomed back kindergarten through 4th grade on Wednesday. The school is hoping to do the same for its pre-K classes on Monday.
Okay, put your mask on.
In Flushing, Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
The Diocese of Brooklyn has been committed to keeping kids safe since the beginning of this pandemic, launching a completely virtual kindergarten through 8th grade school for students across the country. It's New York City's only remote learning option. The program first began in September of 2020 after COVID forced students to go remote. Some 2,400 students enrolled. After schools began to open again, the diocese realized the needs for this kind of online learning were still there, and so they made the academy permanent. There are still more than 160 students enrolled. Principal Stephen Hostler talked to Currents News about what makes the program a success.
Students are really immersing themselves in the content of their classes. We've been blessed with a really good faculty, so it really spells a good start.
The school's curriculum follows New York State standards while also infusing Catholic values and doctrine. For more information on the Academy and to find out how to enroll your child at St. Thomas Aquinas, just go to stacoa.org. As the city continues to fight to keep schools open during Omicron, new numbers from the Department of Education show a surge in cases. According to the new data, at least 14,000 city students and staff have tested positive for COVID-19 since the start of the winter break. That's an 11-day period starting from December 23rd. In just the past 2 days alone, the DOE reports there were more than 4,000 new cases. The city's refusal to allow for remote learning options is pushing a small group of New York City school teachers to sue the DOE. They're asking a judge to allow schools to go remote for the next 2 weeks until COVID cases ease up. Educators argue that a temporary restraining order would give students and staff the chance to be tested before returning to the classroom. City Mayor Eric Adams has been adamant against schools going remote. School districts across the country are grappling with whether or not to bring kids back into the classroom or teach remotely because of the rampant spread of the Omicron variant. Daryl Forges reports.
COVID numbers soaring nationwide. Hospitalizations now at about 113,000, according to the Department of Health and Human Services.
This could be our new normal going forward. Every year or every few months even, we could be seeing these massive surges of cases.
The COVID surge impacting some school systems. In D.C., students must have a negative COVID test before returning Thursday. Detroit delayed school return going virtual through at least January 14th.
That's the safest thing to do. In the city of Detroit, where infection rate is over 7 days is exceeding the 40% range.
In Chicago, classes are canceled after the teachers union voted to go virtual. The school system considers the move a work stoppage, and teachers will not be paid. The teachers union does not believe the current measures in place are safe enough to return to school.
We've been failed by the mayor. We've been failed by the public health office, and teachers and the school staff have decided the only thing that we get control is whether we go into the buildings.
The country's third largest school district insists going to class in person is safe because of mitigation measures. The Biden administration provided billions of dollars in funding for resources for schools during the pandemic and believes schools are safe for kids to go back.
Parents want schools open, and experts are clear that in-person learning is best for kids' physical and mental health and for their education.
Daryl Forges, Currents News.
Mayor Eric Adams visited Elmhurst Hospital in Queens today, announcing $111 million in new funding for New York City's public hospitals to fight the surging number of COVID cases. Hospitalizations are rising statewide, now topping 10,000 for the first time since May of 2020. But ICU admissions remain lower than what they were at the peak of the pandemic. COVID was a big topic Wednesday when New York's first female governor, Kathy Hochul, delivered her State of the State address.
I didn't come here to make history. I came here to make a difference.
Hochul spoke for a little more than a half hour before a limited socially distanced audience in the Assembly Chamber of the state capitol in Albany. She's only been in office for 134 days after taking over for disgraced former Governor Andrew Cuomo. Still, Hochul said she has more than 200 proposals to make the state better. Some of them are in line with the priorities of Catholics. The governor wants to invest in health care, proposing a $10 billion plan to increase the state's health care workforce by 20% over the next 5 years. She wants to tackle homelessness with a plan to create more affordable housing and said we can't ignore the plight of NYCHA residents either. Hochul also wants to focus on climate change, announcing planned investments in offshore wind energy and electric vehicles. To delve deeper into the issues mentioned by the governor, we're joined now by St. John's University political science professor Brian Brown. And Brian, I want to go back to climate change. Governor Hochul mentioned Hurricane Ida, which you know hit the Diocese of Brooklyn really hard. She talked about phasing out our reliance on fossil fuels. Is this what Pope Francis had in mind in Laudato Si'?
Absolutely. And it's also an issue that kind of transcends Democrats and Republicans. We're all impacted by the climate, particularly here in New York and downstate New York City, where we've had some fatalities as a result of these torrential storms. So a good issue to raise, and it's a good issue that could garner bipartisan support in the New York State legislature.
She also announced an idea to create a new rail service that will connect Brooklyn and Queens and referred to the infrastructure issues in New York City as a quality of life issue. Let's listen in.
We need to reconnect neighborhoods that were severed by asphalt highways, disproportionately impacting communities of color. We're going to reverse the damage that was done more than half a century ago.
So what do you think about this proposal? Is it reasonable? You know, it seems like by the time all of this gets done, she may not be in the office anymore.
Well, that's absolutely correct. And we've seen long-term infrastructure projects here in New York State go on, some for a century. So anything that's going to help ease transportation or increase transportation options, particularly in downstate where there's a lot of voters that she's going to need as she runs for a full term of office as governor of New York.
You know, she also got a little personal. She talked about her own family immigrating from Ireland and what New York means to immigrants and refugees.
The time has come for a new American dream, a better, fairer, more inclusive version that I call the New York dream.
But you know, she didn't really dig deep into immigration in New York State. Why do you think that is?
Well, immigration policy is largely set at the federal level, and she spent a brief time in Congress earlier in her political career. But I think really that is a nod also to, again, I don't want to keep inserting the politics of it, but she's running in a primary. She's a challenger on her left as well as on her right. So any sort of nod to our immigrant roots, particularly here in New York City, is going to play well with Democratic primary voters.
All right, she also talked about restoring faith in government, implementing a term limit, and proposing a ban on outside income for elected officials. So her predecessor, Andrew Cuomo's book deal, comes to mind. Do you think she was taking a direct dig at the former governor?
Well, if it wasn't direct, it was certainly indirect. But, you know, it's part of what we've seen in her short time in office is she really wants to separate herself from the Cuomo legacy. And she did that very effectively today, even bringing the speech back to the ornate New York State Legislative Chamber, where it was held for many, many years before Andrew Cuomo. But yeah, she is trying to separate herself from her predecessor. Again, like a big infrastructure project, this term limit change, if it were to come to pass, would take years to happen. 2 consecutive legislators and a vote of the people here in New York State. But it does demonstrate a bigger message, which is, I'm not Andrew Cuomo. I'm the new person in town. Here I am. And it was well played.
Yep, she absolutely sold that one. Brian Brown, St. John's University political science professor, always a joy to talk to you.
Good to see you.
There's a lot more news headed your way.
People recognize that need to look out for one another. And so they're very, very cooperative and very generous.
Bishop Brennan on the success of keeping churches open during COVID. It was just one of the many topics we spoke about affecting the Brooklyn Diocese. And a celebration in downtown Brooklyn where the Cathedral Basilica of St. James marked its 200th birthday. And Bishop Brennan called for joy and peace at the Haitian Ministry's Independence Day Mass. Brooklyn's new bishop got off to a busy start this new year, making key stops on January 1st to mark some big milestones in the Diocese of Brooklyn. Bishop Robert Brennan began 2022 celebrating the opening mass for the first church on Long Island. That's the Cathedral Basilica of St. James in downtown Brooklyn, and it's marking its 200th birthday. The parish was the third to be erected in New York City, only predated by St. Peter's and Old St. Patrick's Cathedral in Manhattan. St. James was constructed in response to the request of lay people who desperately wanted a parish in Brooklyn. Next on Bishop Brennan's agenda was the Haitian Ministry's Independence Day Mass, marking 212 years as the first Black republic in the world. Bishop Brennan appealed for joy and peace at the end of the Mass, but said that those qualities are already present in Haitian Catholics despite the constant turmoil in their homeland. And despite the rise in coronavirus cases across the city, Bishop Brennan says the Catholic Church will continue to remain open, providing a lifeline so many desperately need. The diocese has consistently taken special precautions to protect against the spread of the variant. Some of those include mask wearing, a moratorium on the distribution of wine, and no handshakes during the sign of peace. It's also an important time for the worldwide Catholic Church. The Synod's diocesan phase is well underway in Brooklyn and Queens, with listening sessions being held at the ground level to get feedback from parishioners. Bishop Brennan joins us now to talk more about what his plans are to keep the process going despite the Omicron outbreak. But first, Bishop, you've now completed your first holidays here in Brooklyn, and unfortunately they came with this huge spike in cases. We have a lot of families here in the Diocese of Brooklyn that were affected during this special season. So what's your message to them? You know, how do they keep the faith?
Well, I mean, it goes really to the heart of the message of Christmas that Jesus came in to live the messiness of human life. And boy, you could say today, if life gets messy, it's as messy as it could ever get these days, right? We're dealing with a lot of that and a good amount of suffering, but also even a fair amount of frustration and disappointment. So, today at Mass, we had the story of Jesus walking on the water and meeting the disciples in a storm. The boat was being tossed about. And Jesus approaches them and he says, "Take courage. It is I. Do not be afraid." I think that's his message to us. That's the message of Christmas. Come into the world. I'm with you. So take courage. Take courage. Animo. I had the Mass in Spanish this morning. Animo. Take courage.
Yeah, and you can go to Mass because we are, as we've mentioned already, we're taking those precautions at churches, right?
We've been operating safe, and this is an important thing to know, that we've been heeding medical advice, operating safely, caring for the health and well-being of our parishioners for many months now, since we opened up after those early days of the pandemic. We continue to keep our churches clean. We continue to encourage people to wear masks. And now in New York State, there's the state mandate, and so people are living up to that. I continue to encourage vaccination, and we want to make sure that vaccinations are available. I think that this is before I came, but I think the Diocese of Brooklyn has been right there on the forefront of providing for the health and safety and well-being of our people. The other thing is, it's important I say this, we do encourage people, if you're ill, please don't come out.
Absolutely. You could still watch Mass on TV, which is a great thing. Now let's get to those synod meetings. They're so important, not only in Brooklyn and Queens, but to the worldwide church. You mentioned that you're particularly excited about them because it's a chance to get to know our diocese. So how do we keep those meetings going despite the outbreak? Why do we need to keep them moving forward?
Well, yeah, the conversation does need to continue. Again, we're trying to do them in such a way that it's safe for people and good for their health. There have been particular sessions that we may have had to reschedule because of a number of people who might be ill in a particular area, but we're doing what we can to meet each other along the way.
All right, I want to mention your busy New Year's Day. You stopped at St. James, which has such a rich history as Brooklyn's, really Long Island's mother church. What did you learn about the cathedral that maybe you didn't know before?
Well, I had learned pretty early on coming here that I believe, if I have it right, it's the third oldest church in New York, which is pretty impressive. And I was fascinated going through the history, and I had heard the name Peter Turner before, but now I know who he is. He represented the immigrant community here in Brooklyn, and they would take the ferry over to St. Peter's on Barclay Street, and they petitioned. It would have been 200 years ago, New Year's Day. They petitioned of Bishop Connolly, who was very open to them, building a church in New York and in Brooklyn rather, and basically said, we want a church, we want a pastor, we want to have the fullness of Catholic life here. And that petition of an immigrant community began a legacy of great faith here on Long Island, here in Brooklyn and Queens, but all of Long Island.
Yeah, it really serves as a sort of living archive for the Diocese of Brooklyn. There's all sorts of history and artifacts there. Do you think Catholics in Brooklyn and Queens should try to go to a Mass there or maybe make a pilgrimage of sorts?
I would very much like to encourage that. The idea of pilgrimage is a strong spiritual experience in our Catholic faith. Yeah, as you know, Catholic faith, it involves all the senses and it involves all of us moving. It's not a static, me and my imagination. It's so, we touch, we taste, we listen, we see, and we go. And so, St. James, by the way, is himself the patron saint of pilgrimages. That's why you have the shell, Santiago de Compostela. But I would really encourage, and we're going to do it in a formal way. We're going to invite schools and groups and parishes and individuals to make pilgrimages to St. James, to come for Mass, to come and pray.
Oh, that's a wonderful idea. That'll be great. Now, I also want to really quickly talk about the Haitian Independence Day Mass. The Haitian community, as you know, had a very turbulent 2021. Assassinations, kidnappings, refugees fleeing to the United States only to be halted at the border. You called all Haitians resilient at that Mass. What's the spiritual lesson there for Catholics, all Catholics?
I think it goes back to that first message from today's gospel. So from where does resilience come? Well, it comes from walking with the Lord. In recognizing the resilience of the Haitian people, it's recognizing their faith, and they can teach us that sense of faith to find our strength and our courage, that no matter what the storms are, find our strength and our courage in the Lord Jesus.
A good way to start the new year. Bishop Robert Brennan, thank you so much for being with us today.
Happy New Year and God bless you.
You can hear my full interview with Bishop Brennan on our website. Just go to currentsny.tv. Heavy weather heading into the tri-state region. This after ice caused some hazardous travel conditions. Meteorologists say 2 to 4 inches of snow could blanket the area Thursday night. Some of the snow is expected to fall through Friday's morning commute. Winter weather already causing traffic issues in the Northeast. There were several crashes and road closures Wednesday because of those icy conditions. Down in Virginia, the roads are starting to clear up after hundreds of commuters got caught stranded in the snow Tuesday. Governor Ralph Northam had this to say.
I certainly understand the frustration and fear that many people felt. And it's important to remember that calling out the National Guard is also not an immediate solution. It takes hours to deploy them. Remember that our Guard members have day jobs.
This after chaotic road conditions caused spinouts, jackknifed 18-wheelers, and stopped traffic. Altogether, the Commonwealth and the D.C. region saw an average of 11 inches of snow. Officials say the storm came in strong in the morning, dumping 2 inches per hour. Still to come on Currents News, how a heavenly dessert dreamed up by a priest in a popular cooking competition is helping the poor. It was a close call for one priest in Uruguay as he took on the heat of the kitchen and nearly won MasterChef celebrity. Facing off against comedians, actors, and musicians, Father Juan Andres Verde took second place on the famous cooking competition, ending the 3-course meal challenge with a salute to Saint Pope John Paul II.
For our dear Pope John Paul II, in honor of him, I made the dessert the papieska kremovka. It has the colors of the Holy Father, yellow and white. At the same time, I made a cross on it with powdered sugar, and I put a candy halo on the plate, which was very difficult to make, and was a little symbol of sainthood.
Sounds good. Father Verde says he joined the competition to raise money and help the poor in Uruguay's capital city. Meanwhile, at the Vatican, the circus was in town.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my circus.
Rome's famous Roni roller circus took to the stage during the Pope's general audience Wednesday, filling the hall with music, juggling, and acrobatics. And it wasn't just the pilgrims who were impressed. Pope Francis gave the troupe his full attention and even went on to call their act a show that puts us in touch with beauty. How fun. And that is Currents News. I'm Christine Persichetti. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.